Hey, good morning, everyone, or good day wherever you are. I'm Rick Zanotti, and joining me right next to me is Colleen Sanli. Hey, Colleen, how are you today?
Good morning. I am doing just great, Rick. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Sorry for the Skype inconveniences today. That happens every so often. But we are up and running, and we've got a great guest today. His name is, and probably very familiar to a lot of you, if you've done any kind of video work, whether it's Final Cut Pro, Premiere, or any other kind of video work, you've probably seen either his training or his webinars, which are great. And joining us today is Larry Jordan. Hey, Larry, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Rick. Thank you so much. Colleen, good to have you with us. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Well, Larry, you and I have talked in the past about this, but you've been one of my training heroes for a very long time, and for a lot of reasons. One is your training is great. You have very effective training, and I've learned a lot of software going through you. And you used to be, years ago, I guess, with lynda.com. Was that where you started doing training?
It's where I started doing online training. I was doing teaching before that, but Lynda got me into online.
Okay. And then you went on and created larryjordan.biz. Let me show you the website that you've got. And this is great. That is your YouTube channel right now.
We actually have 5 different things. We've got the YouTube channel, which is Larry Jordan FCP. We've got the main Larry Jordan website, which is larryjordan.biz. We've also got a blog, which is larryjordan/blog. We've also got 2 other sites, digitalproductionbuzz.com, which is an audio podcast devoted to digital production, post-production, and distribution, which is designed to help people that are in the industry understand what's going on from new equipment through marketing, distribution, production, anything related to filmmaking and storytelling is covered by Digital Production Buzz. And another, what I call film school in a box, is the number 2, Reel, REELGUIS, 2 Real Guys. It's hosted by Norman Holland and myself. And we take a look at how you tell stories, how you make films without ever talking about technology. How do you direct actors? How do you deal with problems on set? How do you do costume design? How do you stage a fight scene? These are all things that directors, producers, actors, production people need to know, but we don't care about what type of camera or what type of microphone or what editing system you use. It's all the storytelling side of filmmaking. And we've had a lot of success with that. We have 20 episodes posted, and we're in the process of editing 13 more. So those are the 5 websites that we work with that are all revolving around the idea of what can we do to help filmmakers keep their skills sharp, to find work, get work, and keep their clients happy.
That's great. And it's interesting. One of the things that in the training community, and especially in the e-learning community, people are talking more and more about stories, how a story teaches. And it certainly does. Without the proper story, a lot of things are out of context. I mean, if you're just teaching software, it's a little bit different. But when you're starting to teach concepts and everything else, all of a sudden that story makes a big deal. And people are more and more incorporating video into training. Finally, we all have the bandwidth now that we can actually do that in most companies. And as a result, people are really benefiting from a much more robust training experience by adding video. What's your experience as far as training, video, and what do you see as happening in the near future with training and video?
Well, let's back up a step. It's really, really easy to get distracted by the technology. But our goal is to figure out how to get people trained. And that speaks to the larger issue of how do people learn. And more importantly, how do you get past the internal defenses they put up to make learning difficult? And this is something that an organization that you may not necessarily consider training has been dealing with for hundreds of years, which is the church. And if you think about the most effective ministers and the most effective sermons are pastors that can tell stories. Now, this insight came to me at a very young age because my dad was a Methodist minister, and I had a chance to listen to him in church. And the stuff that people took away was not necessarily the scripture readings, but it was the stories that turned that scripture reading into something that you could identify with in your real life. Well, this taught me a huge lesson. And that is, people are not interested in dry facts. They're interested in how those facts can be applied to a particular problem or situation in their life, and the best way to create that is to tell a story. So when I do my training, whether it's in person in seminars or if I'm doing it online, it's all wrapped around the concept of stories and watching a flower unfold as we're discovering the inner resources. And that really is the thrust behind a lot of what we do, is how do we capture people's attention in a fragmented environment when there's so much information that has to be conveyed, and yet, you know, if all I do is recite dry facts, you're going to remember the first one, and then the rest of it's just going to wash over you. How do we make it palatable? And that is where stories come in.
Right. And that makes such a difference, too, because all of a sudden it puts everything in context. It makes it come to life. It makes it personal.
And it takes the pressure off. All of a sudden, your audience, instead of straining to understand what you're describing in the latest tuning of the fringe localizer, you're sitting there saying, here, listen to a story. And they sit back and they relax and they let the story wash over them. And it isn't the words of the story, it's the message of the story that's important. And that's entirely different. Now, online trainers are not just reciting facts, we're performers. Now, I'm not saying we're singing and dancing and acting stupid, but our job is to captivate the attention of our audience. And we do that in a variety of different ways depending upon our personalities. But stories are easy for many online trainers to use that are a very powerful and effective tool.
That's true. Colleen, any comments in the chat room yet?
Not so far, Rick. I know we have Gina and Jeff's here today as well, too. And Jeff is a really big fan of Larry's as well. So.
Jeff is our friend in Australia who, I think I mentioned to you when we had lunch, that he just signed up for all your stuff. And he's quite a happy camper. And I have to say, he's doing a lot of his own Final Cut video editing and shooting. He's shooting his videos and then editing in Final Cut Pro X. He is loving life right now, and especially with the stuff you've been teaching. So,
well, thank you.
And I'm in that same camp too. I've been going through all your training, and another thing Larry does besides the training they're training webinars. The webinars are a lot of fun. You do those live too. I believe you do them live then record.
There's a couple reasons for it. One is I do a new webinar every week. We do, 6 or 7 new training articles a week, and we work on in-depth multi-dozen movie training as well as in-person training. There's just a lot going on in the company right now. If I didn't have a deadline, it wouldn't get done. So one of the reasons that I do the webinars live is it forces me to come up with new course material, come up with new training, and do it on a regular basis. Otherwise, there's just so much work involved. I just say, I'll deal with this another week or two, and then nothing gets done. So I find that I'm extremely deadline driven. So by doing it live, it makes it really easy. Oh, I got people tuning in tomorrow. I better figure out what we're talking about.
Right. That's true. Now, how did you come up with? You have a very interesting method of training. I know as far as the training part of it, aside from telling stories, when you do your technical training, and I would venture to say there's probably a lot of trainers watching this, or directors or VPs who work in training operations who do simulation training, and they do either very elaborate training or they do some PowerPoint training mixed in with simulations from different tools. Now, you do, I guess you do a combination of PowerPoint and then I imagine you're using something like Camtasia. What are you using to record your presentations? Your
actual everything we do is Mac based. So I'm using Keynotes for the slides, and I'm using Telestream ScreenFlow for the screen capture.
Okay.
And then we edit it in Final Cut Pro, and we package it and post it up for the web. We create a couple different versions: QuickTime Movies and MPEG-4s for posting, depending upon what website it's going to. But interesting in what way, do you think?
What I find really interesting is that, and we've talked about this a little bit, your PowerPoints are actually quite simple, and yet they are exceedingly effective. It could be the power of your voice, the power of just the stories you tell around the PowerPoint, and just your comments. But I find it a very good reinforcing way to learn. And your PowerPoints tend to have the bullets, tend to have points as you're going through it. And yet, it goes contrary to what all the pundits are saying. Everything should be pictures, graphics. I find it very effective, especially for technical training, because there's a lot of key concepts that graphics really don't do well for. You've got to really learn the language. If you're doing something like Final Cut Pro, you really have to learn the language of how it works. And a graphic doesn't represent that well, whereas the text and verbiage that you put on the screen does. It reinforces the word, the concept. And then when you actually do the simulations, again, you're seeing it live in action, and very effective, very good way to do that kind of training. And I'm sure if it went into a complete e-learning kind of mode, you could even make it interactive. But the way it is right now, I think is very effective in terms of getting the actual concepts out there. And you do another thing that's real crucial in today's day and age. You keep it down to bite-sized pieces.
I think there's a number of things going on here. Graphics and coalescing everything into a visual statement is really good when you're not trying to explain anything. You're just trying to get your audience excited about something. Mm-hmm. A product launch, for instance, a graphic is really good because you don't want to give a lot of detail in a product launch. What you want to do is you want to get people excited to come to the store to learn more and to buy it. Training is just the opposite. I don't want to get people all excited about something. I want to get people excited that they can now use something. It's the conveying of information. And so here, I had a chance years ago to take a series of Dale Carnegie courses. And between Dale Carnegie and some of the old circus sideshow routines, you tell people what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And it's this repetition. I want to do everything I can to make some incredibly difficult technology very accessible. Mm-hmm. At the end of the class, I want people to say, well, of course, it's obvious. I know this perfectly now. As opposed to, wow, that was a great teacher. I want them to say, yeah, well, that's always made sense. I don't understand why I didn't understand it before. And so what I do is I craft a path through the wilderness where each step builds on the step before, but each step is a tiny increment. And it isn't until you look back and realize, wait a minute, I'm like at the top of the mountain. I don't even know how I got up here. But this is great. As opposed to this really hard, heavy lifting where you're doing all this strong reaching, and if your grip fails, then suddenly you're falling back. I don't want to have anybody open to that kind of a threat. I want them to feel always like they're in an environment where, of course, I can do this. Of course, this is easy. I just have to pay attention, and I'll be able to get it. And the way that starts is you don't intimidate them at the top. One of the things that I do with my slides is my slides are they're big text, they're easy to read, they're not like eye charts. There's at most 7 bullet points to a slide, and the
I appreciate that.
And open and it's designed to be scanned in a hurry. Mm-hmm. But I read virtually every word that's on the slide. So you hear me say it, you read it, and so you're able to study it after I'm done. There's not a lot of crypticness in here. If there's a technical term, the technical term is defined. And so I set the foundation for about 4 or 5 minutes in a 1-hour presentation. About 5 minutes is set building the foundation with these keynote slides. Then they already know what the terms mean, so when I use them in the course of the demo, it's an old friend coming back to revisit. Now I see why he explained that. Oh, I see how it fits in. And then we go through and we're starting to build layers. And as we start with something really simple. Now, here's the other thing, and you've asked something I care a lot about. One of the things that I've learned is that a lot of instructors want you to create something. They want you to build a bridge. They want you to edit a piece of video. And what I've found is as soon as you start to ask people to create something that has meaning, the whole class falls apart. Because students are so afraid of not doing it perfectly that they miss the bigger message. I don't care if we achieve something that looks great or sounds great or edits perfectly, because the technique of editing a piece of video is the same whether the content makes sense or whether it doesn't. So let's ignore the content. Let's build something completely stupid, something that has no social redeeming value, something you wouldn't even show to your dog. Because then the fear of failure is completely gone. This is a failure before we start. I'm not interested in teaching content. I'm interested in showing you this is how you set the beginning of a clip, this is how you set the end of the clip, this is how you edit it down to the timeline. Oh, well, that's easy. I can do that. Boom, 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 finished. Now, Let's edit something we care about. Well, we already know the technique. We spend the time worrying about content in a separate phase. As soon as you start to ask people to be perfect, now set your playhead at exactly this frame, they say, well, what happens if I'm off a frame? That's not what we're teaching. It's like learning how to drive a car. If the very first thing I do to teach you how to drive a car is to put you in a bumper car and say, this is a steering wheel, watch what happens when you turn it, and you're slamming into all kinds of stuff. This is fun. I understand this because nobody's getting hurt. I'm in a bumper car. Everybody is safe. Oh, is that what the brake does? It stops the car. Whereas now you're out in the city streets, you're looking at pedestrians, you say, if I don't pay attention, I could kill people. That's phase 2. That's not the first phase when you're starting to learn how this stuff works. A lot of the technology that people have, they're coming face to face with it for the first time. And they're terrified that they're going to blow up their computer or destroy Western civilization or ruin their lives or destroy their families or prevent themselves from earning a livelihood. They've got all this fear built up. So let's forget that. Let's just do something that has no social redeeming value whatsoever. They take a deep breath. They say, whoa, this is really cool. I can do this. We can always layer on the perfection and layer on watching and storytelling and content. That can always be added later because now they're not afraid of the software. They say, the software's my old friend. Gosh, I got that down. Piece of cake. That's what my training's designed to do. Take the fear away, give you something stupid to do, which all of a sudden the light bulbs go on, you understand it, you can handle it now. We can layer on as much content complexity as we want. The kids can handle it. It's not an issue.
Yeah, that's a great approach to training. And if you think about it, a lot of the tools we work with, aside from video tools, tend to be authoring tools or what are called multimedia development tools, if you will. Things like Adobe Captivate, Articulate Storyline, Articulate Presenter, iSpring, whatever, Trivantis Lectora. These are all the typical type tools that are used in e-learning. Same exact principles apply. I think people get so stuck on the minutia of training that they forgot what their whole mission was, which is to learn the product. And what a difference it makes when all of a sudden, like you said, you don't have the pressure to learn. You're learning because you're enjoying. You have something to do, and you're not too worried about what the end result is. What do you think about the trend of using video more and more in training? You know, we're not a society that reads that much anymore. So video seems to be the way everything is going, and yet, you know, the combination of video with other media, it's just a great combination. Have you done any work with that, or at least I shouldn't say work with that, but do you have any ideas on that?
There was a great radio commercial many, many years ago. Stan Freberg, who's a comedian, put it together. And the radio commercial opens with the sound of a helicopter going thwacka, thwacka, thwacka. And there's no voiceover. And all of a sudden the rotors pick up speed and the helicopter, obviously under heavy load, picks it up. And the announcer's voice says, we're now going to drop a 40-ton maraschino cherry into a mountain of whipped cream piled in downtown Chicago. And you hear this whistling noise and a thwap as a cherry hits the mountain of whipped cream. And there's a small beat, and the announcer says, now, let's see television do that. You got to understand that video has a need, it has a reason for being, but just simply to show pictures without content to fill the pictures is just eyewash. Now, you are absolutely right. Nobody reads anymore. And so for us to put training in print, you know, we're going to lose everybody below the age of 32.
Right.
So we have to do some level of training in video, but you have to ask yourself, what am I actually showing here? Is it important for me to put my face on screen and all I'm doing is talking? Probably not, because my voice carries all that information. Now, if there's something that I'm doing, if I'm showing how to set up a green screen chroma key shot, and this is where you put the camera, and this is where you have the background, and notice the distance between the foreground and the background, that's okay. I've got some demonstration stuff that I'm doing. But a lot of people just put video up because they don't know any better. One of the things that we want to do as educators is to think about what is our message, what's the best way to deliver that message, what are the tools to deliver that message, and sometimes it isn't video. Sometimes video is just a crutch because we can't figure out how else to get the kids' attention. But, you know, at some point they're not going to watch that either. But you are absolutely right. There's a huge growing need for video, which means there's also a need for people to understand how to use video well, to understand what the strengths of video are, what the weaknesses of video are. I'll give you another example. just before this session started, we were chatting online, and you said, oh, by the way, your camera is not on. Oh, says I didn't realize it was video. Well, he said, just turn your camera on. He says, wrong. I don't just turn my camera on. So what I did is I cleaned up the studio. I set up some lights so you can see me, so I look good. I made sure that I had a clean shirt on as opposed to the obscene T-shirt that I was wearing before. Anyway, I pay attention to what the video is about. If I'm going to do video, it's going to be well lit, it's going to have good audio, it's going to have a good background, it's going to have a good set. You treat your audience with the respect they deserve. Same thing. You have a studio, make sure that studio is clean. You have props, make sure the props are related to what you're talking about. Treat your audience with respect. Make your video look good. Justify the reason that people are going to be spending the time watching this. It's really important stuff.
Yeah,
So
it is.
I have a question for Larry. Well, what's your opinion on all the guerrilla style video that's happening out there now with the smartphones that have these built-in cameras, and everyone's using them as an opportunity to do low-cost video? What's your take on that?
Back when I got started in television, which was many, many decades ago, I worked in a remote truck. And just to be able to take a single camera and broadcast it live in a major market television station took about $2.5 million worth of gear and a crew of 15 people for one camera to do a live shot for, say, a talk show or a newscast. And I was the producer, the director in the truck that was making it all happen. But I couldn't do it by myself. I had to have a large crew and a ton of money to make it happen. Over the years, that remote truck got smaller and smaller, the cameras got smaller and smaller, and microwaves came in, and all of a sudden now we're able to broadcast live off a laptop computer and cameras that are the size of a paperback book. The industry has always been trending smaller for the last 40 years. Everything's been getting cheaper and smaller and more portable, and cell phones are simply the greatest extension of that. But there's two. I don't have a problem with cell phones as long as you, or any other camera, whatever you're shooting, as long as you're thinking about what it is that you're shooting. I am sick to death of cats falling into swimming pools. But the fact that you can, the best camera, what's the line? The best camera is the camera that you've got in your hand. If there's some sort of crisis going on and all you've got is a cell phone, then take pictures of it rather than try and leave the crisis scene, go home, get a better camera, come back, you've lost it. The camera that you've got is better than the camera that you wish you had. But there's also a whole separate story here, which is we've grown up since all of us were born with production design and production techniques. And I find it very, very interesting when people don't pay attention to what has been viscerally implanted in their head. I teach at USC, and I was talking to my students there, and I said, you know, there's an interesting thing when you create a music video. There's two choices you have as a producer and, more importantly, as an editor. And the first choice is, does the group have talent, or does the group not have talent? If the group has talent, you're going to shoot and edit that video one way. If the group doesn't have talent, your job as a director and an editor is to hide the fact that they don't have talent. So how do you hide the fact? Well, number one, you take the camera handheld, you make it really jerky. Number two, you never have any shot in focus. Number three, you never take any clean shot of the group. You surround them with half-naked dancers, working their tails off to distract you totally from the fact that the group itself can't sing or dance. In other words, our job as a director and an editor is to distract us from the message, not to enhance the message. The problem that I've got with a lot of these smaller cameras is not that they are unimportant or not meaningful, but that they're being operated by someone that's doing everything they can to distract us from the message they're trying to convey, not to enhance the message. So the problem I have is not with the device, that's whatever it is, but with the production technique and the fact that they're not paying attention to what the message is that they're conveying with the program they're putting together.
And one thing I just learned, which I kind of knew anyway, is that there's very little talent out there in the music industry from the videos I've seen lately.
Well, you know, you think about it, how many people can really do a really high-quality film? Yeah. How many people can really tell a great story? How many really good musicians are there out there? And the answer is there's not a lot. Creativity is a rare gift And it's not something that everybody has, which is why we enjoy watching really good performers and why 70,000 people will happily go to a stadium to watch someone that's got the talent of getting 70,000 people to feel wonderful all at the same time. This is a gift that not everybody has. That doesn't mean that we can't get better. That doesn't mean that we can't practice our own skills to improve them, but not everybody is equally creative. So one of the challenges that we have as producers and directors, as editors, is when we're working with the talent that we're working with, help them to be as good as we can be, mask their mistakes, enhance their strengths, and that takes a level of thinking about what you're doing and a level of working with the artists to help enhance their positive qualities.
Yeah,
and it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing in education. Not everybody learns at the same speed. Not everybody grasps it as quickly. So how do you repeat the information in a different way so that the fast learners don't feel insulted and the slow learners don't feel they're being patronized? And a lot of the training that I do is here's a neat way to do it. Now watch this. This is so cool. If I do this a second way, look at how. Well, what I've just done is I've repeated it, but I've repeated it with a different energy level. And I've shown a slightly different technique. So the advanced learner now knows too, and the person who's having a struggle keeping up says, oh, now I understand what he's talking about. Now I see why it's so important. Or take a breather, tell a quick story, and then move on again to give people a chance to assimilate and catch up. We are no different than an entertainer in the fact that we're trying to capture the attention of our audience, maintain the attention of our audience, and deliver meaningful material that they need to retain after the training is over. In that case, we're the same thing as a performer on stage. We're delivering different results.
Yep, that's so true. And that is a very effective technique to say it in different ways. And I actually do like when you do that on your training because you change energy levels every so often, actually pretty often, and that gets people's attention. You may be kind of thinking about something. That's
intentional. That's absolute. The whole pacing thing is absolutely intentional. We'll do now. Pay close attention.
Yeah.
I don't tell this to just everyone, but there is a method to my madness in how I do training. Now, isn't this cool? I mean, look at this. This. Now, look at the pacing change. Look at the voice change. Look at the tempo change, the intensity change. I go from slow to fast, intimate to wide again. Why? Because people get bored.
Yep.
And they get bored faster now than they ever have. Well, we got to fix that. That's our job as trainers.
Yep, that's true. Colleen, any other comments in the chat room at this point?
No, not right now, actually. I think Larry's pretty much, taking care of business, essentially, by answering questions that, people could have.
Okay. So he's been answering questions in the chat room?
Well, it's just Jeff there right now, and but I think Larry's delivery is so engaging. I don't think we're really thinking about questions. I think we're focusing more on what he's saying, and the changing of the pace, and the energy, and the message, and the storytelling, and the tips. So,
yeah, it's really good stuff, Larry.
Rick, there's one more point I want to mention.
Yeah.
You have to keep in mind that as soon as you start to do video training, and you put your video out there, people don't say, is this training good or bad in and of itself? You are instantly allowing yourself to be compared with everybody else that does training, which means there's a pretty high bar you have to reach to get people to pay attention to the training that you create. I mean, everything from Mr. Wizard of 50 years ago to the high-quality, high-gloss productions that are put out by professional organizations with millions of dollars to spend. You're looking at what CNN does for coverage versus what a high-end university does. The competition is really strict, really severe. So what we've got to do is we've got to think about ourselves as a trainer. What makes our message unique? Why should somebody pay attention to my training? What do I have to offer that nobody else can offer? These are really deeply reflective questions that we've got to answer for ourselves. And then you come up with your own style. I'm not going to say that anybody else is going to train like I do. They can steal ideas. I have no problem with that. But no one's going to speak exactly the same way. They're not going to structure their stuff the same way, nor should they. Because if you're duplicating what I'm doing, one of the two of us is unnecessary. What you want to do is find your strengths, and remember that if you go online and you're doing a video, you're a performer. And you got to figure out, how am I going to perform, get the information across that I need to get across, and make sure I keep the audience's attention, because whether we like it or not, we're going to be compared with every other video from anybody else that's ever created it, and people are going to say, he's just too boring for words, and you're not going to have any success. So we are, by definition, as soon as you go on camera, you're a performer, and you're competing with everybody else that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very good points.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, at this point, I think we're going to wrap up this show. There's a lot of actually great material in here for people to digest. Because training a lot of times gets stuck in minutia, and that gets them stuck. It doesn't really get them out of there, and as a result, a lot of training is boring.
Can I give you one more thought?
Sure.
As long as we're here, I forget. The reason we do training is to enable people to keep or get a job. And if you think about it, that's about the most vital activity we've got in our world right now. People are looking at our training because they're afraid they're going to lose their work or lose their job or not be able to feed their family. Think of the pressure your audience is under. And think of how we have the ability to deliver to them exactly the information they need that's going to allow them to keep their home, feed their family, and grow their business. That's a huge amount of pressure, but it's a huge opportunity because people need the information that we can provide. And every class I go into, I look at every one of the faces and the students, whether it's online or in person, every single one of those people desperately needs the information that I've got. Mm-hmm. And I am so completely aware of how much they need the information, how desperate they are to get a job, how desperate they are to keep the job, how important the information that we provide is to their economic survival. How can we not do the very best we can in our training when the people that are looking to that training are basing their very lives on what they learn from us?
Sure.
That's a huge responsibility. And that's the step up we have to make as trainers. Don't just kiss it off, because as soon as we do, people's lives change, and not for the better, because we didn't do a good job.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Very good point.
Absolutely.
Well, if you can't get enough of Larry, and a lot of us can't, Larry's going to be on our other show, eMediaChat, on the 26th of September. That is going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's a different show. We're going to get a little bit more technical, a little bit more about where the industry is going, some comments about Final Cut and other things. But Larry, it's been a pleasure having you on today.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to get a hold of Larry, just go to his website, www.larryjordan.biz. Lots of great information there, great webinars, not only paid for content, but a lot of free content, and also his YouTube site, which is, I believe, Larry Jordan FCP.
You got it. All one word, JORDAN FCP.
Yep, lots of good material. And Larry, we really appreciate you having you on today. And
it's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
We look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you, Larry. And I think I've taken away so much more information today than I'd even bargained for.
But what I didn't tell you, Larry, is that Colleen is a budding filmmaker herself. She's learning. She's never done video editing until recently, and she's doing a really darn good job of it.
Well, congratulations, and it's a delight meeting you as well.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good one, everybody. Thanks for being there, and we'll see you next week on eLearnChat. Take care, everyone.